Welcome to Clay to Z at the Amaco Marketing Studio. I'm Kara, and I'm working in the studio today, and I'm working on a few different projects. So I'm working on a bust that I started a couple weeks ago. I'm only working on it during the Friday stream, so it is going kind of slow. I'm also working on these tiles that read Amaco. Can't tell if you can see that. They're just lightly traced at this point, so I'm going to work on those a little bit. I also have some Sgraffito dishes that I'm going to work on. And if I have a little more time, I'm going to work on some on my smug cake stand that I've been working on in the Clay to Z on Tuesdays, because it's a lot of work. So the project that I'm working on here, this bust, is going to eventually end up in a Tuesday glazing video so that I can talk about glazing sculptural things and textures and different kinds of techniques. In the meantime, I'm going to be working on building it. So thanks for joining me. I see that I have a few people joining in. And let me adjust this so you can see a little bit more. I do have some people in the studio with me, but they're being quiet at the moment, and I'll show you what they're working on in a little bit. So I'm just coil building this at this point. I sometimes use a combination of slab and coil for doing figurative projects. It works pretty well. And in this one, let me see, where did my little toothy rib go? In this one, I'm just using big fat coils to build it, and I'll squeeze the coils smaller as I go up. But I'm looking for a tool that I may have moved and left out. So let's see. Good morning, Maura. I will be back. In the meantime, I'll turn you guys to say hi to David. Hi, David.
Hello.
David, you want to tell people what you're working on?
Yeah.
So David's going to tell you what he's working on.
Last week I was working on these mugs, and I put them in our damp box so they wouldn't dry out. And today I'm figuring out a way to make some handles that kind of match the texture, since there's so much texture on them. And I think last week the camera didn't really show much of the texture in the YouTube video, but this is created by putting a slab on the cement board and then using a rolling pin. And then the side that's touching the cement board gets those cracks.
Nice.
And I cut them out with a little bit of plastic so they get a round edge without having to use the sponge on them and ruining the nice cracks.
Sounds good. I'm really excited about how those are going to turn out. So, Hi, Allison. And so I'm going to keep building here, and I'll show you what David's working on in a little while longer. When he gets some handles on there, I'll show you how those are going. Good morning, Marie. So I've scored. That was the tool I was looking for, was my toothy rib. You can see the little teethies on there. This is one of my favorite tools. So I just get a big, thick coil. It's not slab. On here. Good morning, Kathleen. Constantly looking for a tool. I know I just had a moment ago. Oh, yeah. It's always happening that way. I'm always looking for something. So I even have a little caddy, and it still, tools seem to disappear. So now I'm going to start building out the jaw. So last time I showed you all how I made like a little bridge in the middle, and that helps to keep the weight of the head from collapsing. Now, that is not just something to use for figurative sculpture. You can use that in any kind of sculptural form. And I'm joining the coils inside and out, and then as I join, I'm squeezing them up to thin them out. Yes, it's going to be a bust, Evelyn. Good morning. So as I'm going, I'm going to build that jaw out. And make sure that none of this is too thick as I go. So as I squeeze, I want it to be about that thick. So about a half an inch. It's thicker at the bottom and thinner as I go up, and that helps to keep the piece pretty stable, so I don't have to worry about it tipping over. And one of the tricky parts with doing figurative sculpture is also keeping things in what is the word I'm looking for? I probably lose words as often as I lose tools. Keep the size appropriate. So I want to make sure that I'm not getting too big, too small. And the clay that I'm using, Allison, proportional. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you, David. The clay that I'm using is 11M. This is Amaco's A-Mix. So it's a smooth white stoneware. And I actually like sculpting with it, although most people throw with it. But I really like it for hand building. It's actually quite forgiving as a hand building clay, which a lot of smooth clays are not terribly forgiving. And So I really appreciate that it is. So now it's gotten to this point with the chin. I'm actually going to let it sit for a little while and stiffen up. So a lot of times when I have a lot of sculptures, I'll be working on 5 or 6 sculptures at a time so that I can reach this point and then go work on another piece. So I don't have to overwork a single piece. I can just let that sit for a little bit. So while that is stiffening up, I'm going to switch gears here and I'm going to work on these little tiles that say Amaco on them. So I'm going to get some of my tools out that help me with carving. I know I have one in my pocket. There we go. This is actually a sgraffito tool, but it works quite well for doing basic carving. So I have a printout that I traced onto my clay last week. And now that the clay is leather hard, I can very easily use a tool to carve it out. It was too wet last week to do this. I would have just made a big mess. And the other thing that I use when doing this, and this is also 11M if anybody's curious. The other thing that I use while doing this is my little brush. This is a brush that got broken, so it's not very helpful for glazing, but it's great for working on sgraffito or carving to just brush away all the little crumbs. So while I'm here and everybody's hanging out, do you all have questions for me? You're welcome to ask any questions that you have saved up for the week. I know that there's been a lot of news happening this week coming out of Amaco. We have new glazes, which I talked about last week, and I showed them in the Tuesday live stream. So if you want to go see those, they are on YouTube. Go to Amaco Brent's channel and you can find our latest live stream, our latest Q and Amaco. And I showed samples of all of them. Very beautiful colors. We've also, so we have new celadons, new velvets, new satin mats. The satin mats, really exciting for me. I know that you guys have probably heard me say how much I love satin mat. The Amaco satin mats are just so silky. Some of my favorite glazes. So having new colors, very, very exciting. For me at least. And you can also see our print ads in Ceramics Monthly. They just came out this September. Ceramics Monthly has ads for our two of our new velvets, Nectar and Blood Orange, as well as our new celadons. We need a satin matte brown. Well, one of the satin mattes is Cayenne, so it's kind of a spicy red, brown, russety color. And Susan saying we need a satin matte brown. I have discovered if you mix equal parts of the blue-green satin matte and orange satin matte, that you get a beautiful dark brown. It is absolutely perfect. So Susan, orange and blue-green satin matte, gorgeous brown. You can always lighten it with a little bit of white. Beth is asking, am I correct that you said the other day that you can use velvets and smugs over satin matte? And yes, so you are correct. I like using the smugs over the satin mattes, and they work quite well. I have had some velvets that work over the satin mattes, but because the velvets have a high clay content in comparison to the smugs, sometimes they come out really crunchy and can even be like bubbly and not so great. So test before you dive into using velvets over satin mattes. Susan, you are welcome. I was really excited when I found that brown too, so I know what you mean. And I expect that we will probably have some more satin matte colors in the future. We will see. So the satin mattes, the celadons, the velvets, all really exciting. And I know that some of you have also heard the sad news that we've had, that we have officially announced that PC56 Ancient Copper has been discontinued. And it was very sad here as well. And there were many, many people here at Amaco who were very, very upset on a personal level, because it's been a favorite glaze for many of our Potter employees, and that was difficult news. But we are working on a new version, and I don't have any timeline for when that may be out. It really depends on how our testing goes. But trust us, we are working on it because we love that glaze too. Good morning, Janet. So I'm just carving away to give some depth to this tile. And following the tracing lines that I made. Once I get done with this one, I'm actually going to shift gears and work on a little maquette. And for those of you who are now going, what was that word? What did she say? A maquette is just a small sample sculpture. So I think of them as test tiles for my sculpture. It's just a little sample, little tester. So Kathleen asks, how long did you let those tiles set before you started carving today? I'd like to make a sign with our house numbers. So I rolled these out last week, and I traced the words on them. And then I wrapped them fairly tightly, and they've been under plastic all week. But it depends on your space as to how long you can do that. Because I have been in workspaces where I could have wrapped these as tightly as possible and they would have been leather hard the next day. And then I've been in other spaces where they could stay under plastic for a month and be perfectly fine. If I'd put them in a damp box, they probably would have been a little bit damper than if I had just wrapped them. But our studio fluctuates, and in the wintertime, things dry quickly, and in the summertime, things dry slowly. So it depends. And how thick they are, they're roughly half an inch. Karen says, hi, I seem to be late to the news. Why are you stopping production of ancient copper? Kathleen, we actually had stopped production of ancient copper about 6 months ago because we were having an issue with materials. And we were trying to develop a reformulated version, but the reformulation was having shelf life issues that we could not rectify. We could not remedy those issues. So after several months and taking back orders, we came to the conclusion that there was not a way to reformulate it. And so we are discontinuing the glaze, and we are working to create a new version. So we are going to try to bring you a glaze that has all of the features of ancient copper, but we're just going to have to see how that works out. If you'd like to see information about it, Karen, there is a pinned post on the Amaco 5.6 glaze forum. If you are not in the forum, which I assume you are because you are joining us from the 5.6 group, I've also posted it on the Amaco company page, pardon me, and on my profile, Amaco Brent. Why is the ancient copper that I got recently purple in color? Beth, the reason that, and that is the raw glaze, I am sure you're saying, is that the raw glaze looks more purple than its usual orangey red. And that is because we sourced a different, we got a different source for one of the raw materials. Chemically, it is exactly the same as the previous material, but it does look different before you fire it. In firing, it is exactly the same because chemically, it is exactly the same. That was not the problem. I have had a few people who have said that they had old formula or new formula and that they liked old formula or new formula. There has not been any formulation change that we have shipped out. So all the batches of ancient copper that are out there are chemically identical. If they look different, it is just a different source of a raw material. But from a chemical yes, it would fire the same. From a chemical standpoint, it is exactly the same. Think of it like cooking. You might get some of your the things for your recipe. Your recipe is exactly the same, but you may get some of your ingredients at a different store, and they might look a little different, or they might look different from depending on the time of year. But whether you're getting frozen peaches or fresh peaches, they still work the same way. Karen says she's looking forward to the next version, and so are we. We are looking forward to it, and I am very optimistic about having something really beautiful to share with everybody. So you can see, now you can see the Amaco letters standing out a little bit more. It's a little easier to see. So I've carved them out just a little bit with my Sgraffito tool. Rachel says, my new batch of black aventurine was a different color and way thinner. It seemed to fire okay, but I was worried at how thin it was compared to the first batch. So Rachel, again, with the kind of like getting different ingredients for a cooking recipe, about a year ago, we changed the gum solution, and the newer gum, this does not affect the fired glaze, but the new gum made the glaze disperse a little bit more, which makes it feel a little thinner. There's not more water, it just makes the glaze more, it seems strange to say more wet, but it makes the glaze more fluid in the raw state. So it may seem more watery, but it should still fire the same with 3 coats. If you're having trouble, add another coat. It's the same amount of glaze, but it might be going on a little thinner. So try that. If you see any change, you said you didn't see any change. And of course, the color change is the same as what happened with the ancient copper. We had to source a different material. The formulation did not change. The chemistry did not change, just where we get that ingredient from changed. And Eagle Eye says, what clay does Amaco use to make the test tiles? I bought many of their Celadons and I'm about to give up on them. So Eagle Eye, we use 11M for almost all of our test tiles, particularly when it comes to the Celadons. There are a number of clays that the Celadons work really well on, and there are some clays that the Celadons do not care for. So if you want some more guidance, I recommend on clay bodies to discuss it with our tech support team. You can contact them by emailing them, emailing customercare@amaco.com, and that's AMACO, Amaco. And they can help guide you to a clay that works. Kathleen says, one more question about your Amaco tile you're working on, because I want to make sure I use the right kind of clay. What clay is best for making house numbers? Does it need to have grog? Well, It does not need to have grog. This does not have grog, and I have made, I actually have house numbers on my house that do not, it's the same clay, and I have not had any problems. I would say that the main thing is how you're planning on finishing your house numbers, how you're planning on making them, how you're planning on attaching them, and what climate you live in. So I live here in Indiana, and it does freeze. We have a pretty strong freeze thaw cycle every winter. And I have used 11M for house numbers, but they are protected. So my house numbers are on a deep porch, so they're at least, I'd say at least 7 feet from the edge of the porch, so they don't get rain or snow directly on them. And they are also glazed along the front where weather might contact them, but not along the back. So that helps as well. You can use a groggy clay for house numbers, but you do not have to. The main thing is trying to keep tiles flat. And how I keep tiles flat is by turning them over frequently while they're drying. And you can actually see this one is pretty flat, but it's got a slight bow. So at the end of today, I'm going to turn it face down and let it dry on the back a little bit more, which will help it to reverse that bow. You don't want to let it get too bowed. It may bow back during firing. And tiles that seem perfectly flat, even out of the bisque fire, can warp and get very, very bowed in the glaze firing. So that's that memory that people talk about. Not really sure exactly how it works, but I've seen it. I've had it happen. And I will tell you that clay does not generally like being flat, so you have to kind of baby it. Be patient. So now that that is more or less carved out, I have a small, teeny tiny trim tool that I'm going to use to kind of smooth some of this. Kathleen, you're very welcome. There's lots of tricks to making tiles. For my part, I find that just turning them frequently as they dry is the best way to keep them flat and even. I don't dry them between sheetrock. But I know a lot of people who do, and they swear by it. So if that works for you, that is great, because it's certainly a lot easier. So I'm going to check on my sculpture now and see if maybe I'm ready to add some more clay. It's getting there. I can probably put another coil on. Here, let's turn this so you guys can see. David is putting some handles on.
Just one.
Just one. Putting a handle on.
It's taken a long time.
That's okay. You're working out the prototypes. I'm going to move back to my tile making. Let's see if I can do this where you guys can see both what I'm working on and what David's working on, because I think that gives you guys the best of both worlds. I'll move my speaker over. You guys might have spotted one of our graphic designers walking through. What's so funny?
She laughed.
Yes. I think that Sarah laughed because she realized she was caught on camera. So it is now past 11. Wow, we've gone over half an hour. So I'm going to wash my hands up a little bit and work on my cake stand with the octopi. Does anybody have any other questions while we're working? Marie says, watching now in my studio, and it's very peaceful and wonderful to have online company such as this to keep me company. I can work along with you as you are working. Love the mugs. Aren't those textures great?
Thank you.
Yes, this is a very, very calm and quiet sort of studio time. You know, I think I might be able to do some sgraffito on this. I'm not sure. So this is one of our new velvet underglazes. This is the sea glass. And let's see, it might be a little on the dry side. I did not put this into the damp box when I should have. I'm going to do like a message in a bottle image. So you can see it's pretty dry. Let's see if I can get it any closer. I'm out of frame. Move these out of the way so I don't get underglaze all over them. I'm having a little chipping of my underglaze because when I realized that these had gotten rather dry, I tried spraying it with vinegar and water, the water that I use to join my clay. And unfortunately, vinegar likes to loosen up and dissolve those clay particles. So what it did is it made my underglaze and my clay start to separate. So I'm going to get some little chipped spots. So that was an oops. Don't do that. I don't know if you can see where it chipped. Probably not. So there's my message in a bottle. So one of its many offenses is vinegar. Yes, Kyle. Sorry. Me and my vinegar. You're just going to have to be sad for the poor Sgraffito through the internet. I know you can smell that vinegar from where you are. So vinegar is a joining slip, and then applying the underglaze made the underglaze crack? No. So what happened was I was trying to use my water sprayer to soften the clay and underglaze so that it would be a little easier to do the Sgraffito, and it made the underglaze and the clay not want to be friends anymore. So yes, the vinegar works to join, but the way that it does that is by dissolving those clay particles and those underglaze particles. And when I applied it to this bone dry piece, it dissolved the clay particles in such a way that they didn't want to stay together anymore. So you can't really use vinegar to stick everything together. It's not a glue, but it does help when you are joining leather hard or soft pieces together instead of a slip. Kyle says the underglaze turned its nose up. Yes, it did. It said, forget that. I'm out of here. Now it is mostly staying on. It's just chipping in some areas. But I will remember not to do that in the future. Can also tell that there's a problem, that this is too dry to be doing Sgraffito, because you can actually hear the scritchy noise as I'm doing this. And when I'm doing Sgraffito, I should not be hearing any noise. It should be quiet. So I'm going to let that do its thing there. And I'm going to let you all go for today. Thank you for joining me for Clay to Z. If you have any other questions, just drop them in the comments and I'll answer them later offline. And we'll be back next Friday with a little bit more. And of course, I will be here on Tuesdays for glazing with Amaco and Q and Amaco. So thanks again. Happy glazing.